So there's this one piece of brainstorming advice that you always hear. Don't be critical. Every idea is a good idea. I think that's wrong. I think you should be critical of your ideas when you're brainstorming. But there's a trick to it. And whether you're studying to be an engineer, a product designer, an architect, or whatever, I think that mastering this trick is an important step at becoming better at developing surprising and realistic design ideas quickly. I realized this a while ago when I was helping a group of students brainstorm some ideas for a medical device they were working on. They needed to coat a balloon-like device in a drug, and that drug was available either as a gel or in a cloth, like a bandage. But you can't just wrap a bandage around a balloon because the balloon is going to blow up, and then the bandage needs to have the correct shape to cover the sphere. So I had an idea where I said, okay, why don't we cut this cloth-like material into this flower-like shape, like the paper that would cover a globe, and then this could wrap around the balloon. But they went, no, that won't work, because we only have that drug-embedded cloth available in these rolls that are not wide enough to make such a shape. Okay, I said, well, then why don't we cut this shape up and make it so that it does fit onto that roll, and we'll just make a whole series of shapes that look a little bit like this. And then you just stack 3 or 4 of them on top of each other. And you'd still have a shape that when you get the balloon with this little tube going through, and you put it on top of here, so here the leaves would be here, and they can fold down and they'll cover the space of the sphere. So because they were critical, I was able to develop the idea a little bit so that it would work. Okay, so what about that gel? How might we use that to coat this balloon? Couldn't we just get a big bucket, I said, fill it with gel, and then get the balloon with that tube going through, and just dunk it in the balloon, get it out, and that would coat it. Well, that won't work, they said, because that drug is expensive stuff, and if you have a whole bucket of that gel, it's going to be too expensive. Okay, I said, well, we can fix that by making the bucket a little bit smaller, or actually by making it sort of a vial perhaps, and then making it exactly the right size so that the balloon, when it's not inflated yet, fits exactly inside it. So now we need a lot less of that gel. That might work. No, that won't work, they said, because first of all, we forgot to tell you, but we want to keep this bit of the balloon, that tip of the tube sticking out, that needs to stay clean. Plus, we're afraid that if you put this in this vial that is exactly the right size, there will be gel that comes squirting out the sides and it'll become a big mess. Okay, I said, fine. Perhaps if we make a longitudinal bucket that we fill with gel, and then we can sort of put it in like that, and perhaps then we can rotate it to coat it in the gel. Hey, that might be a good idea, they said, and why don't you make a little notch there so that the tube can actually function as an axle so that it rotates. So if you draw that in 2D, now we have a little bit of a bucket with a little bit of gel inside, and then we have the balloon that goes in, and we rotate it, and then the outside gets coated in gel, and the tip stays nice and clean. Again, we would never have come up with that last idea if we hadn't been critical of that first stupid bucket idea. When you see something wrong with an idea, you can do one of 3 things. You can ignore it and pretend it's great actually. That's what that famous brainstorming advice seems to be saying. Or, and this is what beginners tend to do, this is what those students were doing, you can say, well, that won't work, bad idea, and dismiss it. Don't do that. The third option, and this is the trick, is to accept the criticism but not to dismiss the idea, to try and do something about it, to ask yourself, what can you change about the idea to make the problem less of a problem? Not to solve it entirely, you're not going to make it perfect in one go, but just to make it a little bit better, because after that you might think of another thing, and so on. And step by step, this process can turn something super unrealistic into a valuable design idea. Now, I know this is easier said than done. In my experience teaching design, it's surprisingly difficult for people to learn to adopt this attitude, to defer judgment, to be critical without being negative. And it takes a while to learn to judge how much time you should spend playing around with an idea before you move on to other options. That skill only comes with experience. But you should always spend some time playing around with an idea before dismissing it, even if you're just changing things at random. So forget that brainstorming advice. Be critical. Use the fact that you're seeing a problem to make the idea better, to make it different. That's what designers mean when they talk about exploring ideas and developing ideas. Because good ideas don't just magically appear. You have to go looking for them. And you might just find a good idea by playing around with a bad one.